Greetings, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we are here to explore how market research or general intelligence go beyond information and become powerful tools for confidence and help you build strategy. It is my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Oliver. He's the CEO of the business research company, and today, Oliver will share how CXOs can use intelligence to reduce blind spots, anticipate market movements, and make smarter strategic choices in an increasingly AI driven environment. Oliver, over to you.
Thank you, Soumya. Hello, everybody. I guess yes, I wanted to talk to you about I guess to a large extent is about the continued importance of market intelligence in the current environment. I think there's a lot of emphasis at the moment on technological change, on the potential of AI, and in some ways that's making a lot of the discussion and a lot of companies kind of look inwards in some ways, because there's a lot of thought at the moment on the operational, on how we can do things more efficiently, how we can automate processes, etc., how we can potentially do jobs faster and more efficiency with greater efficiency, which is great, and that has clear positive implications for the for output, production, productivity, and potentially for reducing cost in companies and organizations. But I think it's easy to slightly lose sight of the fact that if we aren't simultaneously continuing with our efforts to understand our market and its potential, and also and identify opportunities, identify customers, compete with our competitors, see where the strategic opportunities lie, etc., then all this greater sort of internal efficiency is not necessarily it's not necessarily going to expand your top line, your revenue, and that's where market research, market intelligence plays a critical role. So the idea of this talk is to focus on the sort of CEO, C-level, and why keeping a firm eye on market research, market intelligence is very important. Now, so in terms of the agenda for this, we'll start off by talking about why market research, competitive intelligence, market intelligence is important at the C-level. Then we'll do a little bit about some of the basics of how to execute a market intelligence project, and some of the choices that you have within that, whether to go in-house, out-house, whether to go continuous, whether to go in sort of short project bursts. So those kind of points. No webinar or presentation is complete at the moment without talking about AI. Maybe it never will be again. So the next section talks about competitive intelligence in the AI era and how AI is affecting it, and how we're able to utilize it. And then finally we wrap up by talking about primary research and how in some ways that becomes even more important in the current current market situation. So I wanted to just
Where's that?
talk.
Oh, Popeyes. Oh, cool.
Hello?
Yeah, I think it's
Hello?
Sorry.
You could mute, please. So, um, uh, so looking at the different uh, types of market research, market intelligence that a someone at the C level needs to be considering, um, and why they're important. So we do a huge amount of our work on identifying markets. TBRC, the market research, the business research company, we cover more than 20,000 different markets, showing, basically identifying their value, their historic growth, and their potential for future growth. So this is a vital part of market intelligence, and it's a vital element for C-level to look at. Um, this is how you understand your potential. It's how you understand your market share. It's how you identify markets that have got good growth potential, identify markets which are moving more slowly and which might be more cash cows, etc. So market identification is a critical element. Moving along the top row there, understanding customers. I think that is a massively important thing for the C-level to do. Again, it's quite easy for C-level participants to become quite inward looking. There's a lot of operational stuff going on. You might be responsible for different initiatives internally, etc. But that outward look to your customers through your marketing and your market research function, but also through talking to people, is really important. We do a lot of customer surveys, so we do some B2C big survey work, but mainly we do B2B work. So we might be talking to physicians in the healthcare market, or we might be talking to distributors to understand um, what they're doing, what their perceptions of different products and services are, and then how they're reflecting the end customer. So this is really important research, or the directly to B2B customers. So we do surveys for companies of their regular B2B customers, and how they're feeling and their view of the brand, their view of the product and service, how well they're being handled, etc., so that you can really get visibility on that touch point. Competitor research is obviously vital. So there are a number of ways of approaching this. I think one of those things that should ideally be done on a continuous basis. So there are a lot of tools out there, things like Clue, etc., that you can use to constantly monitor your competitors. But then if you want a deeper dive, you can use a company like ours that has the capability to really go in there and speak to your competitors, people who perhaps would not be willing to talk to you directly, and understand the key developments that are going on with them. So we do a lot of that type of work, both understanding what they're doing strategically, but also a fair amount of fairly detailed, hard factual information about what these competitors are doing, where they're operating, etc. May wonder why they would tell you that. But what I would say is that they do. It's not easy, and it's not always a complete picture, but you can get great insights into what your competitors are doing if you know that if you either know how to do it, or probably in most cases you use an agency that's experienced in competitive intelligence. Um, op Operational intelligence, I think lots of companies, as I said, are focusing on this at the moment, how to improve internal efficiency, etc. That's not something that we focus on hugely, but is also clearly important. Optimizing products and services through getting customer feedback, through brand recognition surveys, etc., is also very important. Um, Trend spotting. So I think there again, this should be a sort of ongoing process. Social media watching can be part of this, media watching. So we use all these tools on behalf of many of our clients, or they have them running internally on their research teams to identify new trends and what's happening in the market, and what's happening with their customers, etc. And then all these things are pulled together to make business decisions. It could be about investment, it could be about go to market, it could be about asset purchase. All these different decisions can be driven off the back of this type of research. Oh, I've gone too far. So I've talked a bit about why this type of research is important. I guess more immediately, what's important at the moment. Um, there's significant uh, fragmentation going on, a lot of macroeconomic change, a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. That means that's accelerating trends. Technology trends are moving faster than ever. AI, robotics, many others, increased importance of different energy sources, etc., are moving markets quickly. We've had a lot of supply chain disruption, particularly driven by COVID and then by the political situation with Trump and tariffs and trade wars, etc. So there's a lot to be monitoring and understanding there. Um, so as a result of all that, CXOs need real decision-ready intelligence, not just raw data feeds like financial data feeds, etc., but a combination of high-quality data and strong interpretation. In some ways, the interpretation is easier. AI is quite good at interpreting information once you have it, but the quality and depth of that information is really important. So some ways to ensure that intelligence is really embedded within your processes. Trying to think of it as a continuous process and not just an ad hoc one-off exercise. That said, I think deep dive projects can be useful, particularly when you're bringing in primary intelligence, etc., to really update and sharpen your understanding of a particular issue. But it should be seen as an ongoing exercise. Links CI directly to strategic planning cycles. So making sure that all this external information is combining with your internal information that's maybe coming from your sales teams, from your marketing teams, etc. And then driving strategic planning, and that strategic planning isn't too internally focused. And then that should then align with your capital allocation, your go-to-market decisions. And then ensuring ownership of intelligence. So making sure that intelligence is represented at a high level in your company. So if you're at the C-level of your company, are you aware of your responsibility to be driving knowledge and intelligence at the highest level of the company? And then also, is there or is there a specific role related to strategy and intelligence at the highest level of the company? Um, so bring that together, why does it all matter? So market research, it reduces your blind spots. It can give you fast, reliable information to make decisions on. Um, Primary research can give you a defensible advantage. I'll talk about that a bit more. And yeah, it can give you stronger, more confident outcomes, particularly when you combine it with the information that and effectively harvesting the information that your company is gathering through its existing information sources like the sales team, the marketing team, etc., and then augmenting that with specific research from an intelligence function. Any questions at this point?
Yes, Oliver, we do have a couple of them. Just a second.
Hi, Oliver.
Hello.
So my question is, how is interview insight validated to avoid individual bias or anecdotal conclusions?
Um, I will come back to that because I think it relates more to the primary research part. So I will come back to that question a bit later on if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
That's the question, Oliver. That's it.
Okay. All right. As I said, I will, if you remind me of that question when we come to the primary research part, I will try and cover that off. Okay, so how do you go about executing this type of research? So there are some different approaches, some different choices that you need to make. So do you go in-house or do you go outsource? Um, so that can be affected by budget. It can be affected by the extent to which bias may be an issue. It can be affected by the extent to which you want to be doing competitive research. So do you want the research to be coming from you directly? So it can be affected by whether you want it to be ongoing or one-off. Both of them can be done in either way, but I think a lot of companies tend to run ongoing processes internally and then use external vendors for one-off projects. Um, Key, how does a research project work? Well, it's pretty straightforward: planning, research, analysis, and then conclusions. So it's a sort of full cycle of a project like any other project in most businesses. And then for ongoing processes, there's information monitoring, knowledge sharing, listening, as I said, kind of social media listening, etc. That gives you the kind of a constant flow of signals into your organization. So first step in these type of projects is to define and characterize the market. So ensure that you're using precise market definitions. Nothing is less useful than having data where the which isn't defined properly, so you're not entirely sure what it means or what it refers to, what's included, what's excluded, how is it segmented. Um, and making sure that you're focusing on the the right market and the right definition of that market for the research need. I think I've come back to that one. Yeah, so this is the basic process for a research project. I think most of you hopefully will be fairly familiar with this. So um, gathering the requirement, designing the project, working out basically how you're going to do it, starting with the collection through secondary sources, things like government websites, company websites, academic and business journals, etc. And then from primary research through interviews, expert interviews, participant interviews, etc. The analysis, pulling together both the primary inputs and the secondary inputs, utilizing new tools like summarization, text analysis, then starting to be more productive with the content. So modeling and forecasting based on your inputs, and doing financial and statistical analysis. And then finally, quality controls, data validation, sanity checking, and sharing with the internal stakeholders through delivery, through reports or presentations or spreadsheets, etc. And then often there's another phase there where you're gathering feedback and updating or gap filling for particular questions from the stakeholders. Um, so that's the basis of how research projects are conducted. Now looking at the way that the landscape for these projects is changing, looking more at the CI landscape, at how it's being affected by AI. So AI is summarizing publicly available information, and it generally uh, describes what happened, but less strong on why it happened. AI can detect signals, but you need human intelligence to validate it. I think we're all aware that AI has these sort of hallucinatory potentials, so um, it needs to be checked. And just as data that is produced by AI needs to be checked through secondary research and validation, um, sort of trend-based or conceptual information from AI needs to be checked with human intelligence to make sure that these trends or ideas that may seem quite plausible, whether they're really happening in real life. AI is definitely very good at producing plausible material, but it's not always, just because something's plausible and sounds good, that doesn't mean you should base your business plan around it. So AI is fast, cheap, uniform, public, fairly surface level. I think it's quite difficult to get. AI is very good at kind of pulling things together and coming up with high level conclusions. It's not necessarily very good at kind of brainstorming out all the varieties of things. And that's another aspect where human intelligence is important. Primary research is exclusive. So there's a critical factor that it's not in the public domain. It's not information that other people have, and it's also contextual and more behavioral and um, easier to validate or more likely to be evidence that there's more evidence that it's true than just something that's generated by AI. Um, slightly struggling with how to move. Right. Um, and then when it comes to how these things work together, um, competitors are launching faster due to AI-led product iteration, information parity across industries. So AI makes all the information that's in the public domain much easier and much more accessible, much more easily accessible. And therefore, the advantage lies with the people who have information beyond what is in the public domain. Now, that might be having access to data sources which are hidden, which are behind paywalls, etc. And there's a lot of emphasis on that at the moment because that's where the competitive advantage can lie, but also primary research, so information that you can only get by talking to people, market participants, executives, leading experts, etc. Which is so you're getting insight which is not in the public domain, and stakeholders in the C-suite are therefore demanding kind of real-time, conclusion-based, actionable insights from this research. AI is also supporting primary research in that it makes it easier and quicker to do. There's all sorts of tools, AI tools that help with primary research, from helping you design the questionnaire, transcription, summarization, text analysis, and then helping you to identify and approach potential respondents. Um, um, but and there are even interesting new areas like synthetic persona interviews, where AI kind of creates a persona related within a particular type, and that person can be interviewed. But again, there are significant concerns about that in terms of the quality of the data that is produced. So as it says here, AI cannot interview a frustrated distributor, uncover competitors' internal delays, observe real-time buying behavior, or assess tone, confidence, hesitation, or intent. Good. Uh, thank you everybody for that. That's most of what I wanted to cover today. I thought I'd finish off with a few case studies just to talk about to show how kind of relevant and how some of the key issues that are facing the world economy and key industries globally, how they are research is going going on into them even as we speak, and that even in these very cutting edge areas, market intelligence is still playing a key role on the basis of a few of the projects that we happen to be working on at the moment. I wonder whether there are any other questions at this stage, Soumya.
It's just
Hello,
one.
Oliver.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How reliable are synthetic persona interviews, and how should executives use them versus real interviews?
Yes. So we just mentioned that. I think are they useful? I mean, people are using them sometimes in situations where they have surveys where they literally are unable to fulfill certain quotas within the survey. It is kind of like regarded as better than nothing. They can be useful. They're more useful in groups of people where there's a huge amount of base data available for that group. So if you're talking about, I don't know, a specific consumer type, like a segment, that might the output might be better because there's such a huge amount of social media content and written content available on the attitudes um, and behaviors of that group, and therefore it's the AI can generate a pretty persuasive persona. I think it's much less useful when you're, if you're doing a piece of research where you need to speak to the marketing manager for a particular complex piece of biotechnology, for example. There won't tend to be enough data for the persona to be likely to give realistic answers. So it's not valueless, but it's not as good as real in-person research, and it needs to be very clearly flagged up when you're using that type of research as opposed to genuine research, or where you're using it. And I think that is a big danger, that it gets mixed in without people realizing it. Thank you for that question. So, just to talk about a few case studies that we're working on at the moment, just to show, I guess, how some of the key things that you're seeing in the news, in the business news, are these are also the concerns which are driving this type of research. So one thing we're working on at the moment is a big project related to internet and data center infrastructure, looking at firewalls, switches, routers, etc., and basically the supply chain for them. So how all these vital pieces of kit, which are the building blocks of the internet, essentially, who's supplying them, in what volumes, how quickly can they supply them, what are their inventories like, all this kind of information. So when you're those of you that are following the financial news and realize how important the data center build out is, this kind of in-depth research is giving market competitors a clearer understanding of what's going on there. So this type of quite hardcore interview-based, I guess you could describe it as slow research, takes like 6 to 8 weeks. In-depth research is still very important in these fast-moving, hot markets. Another example being that we're doing a project on smartphone distribution, just looking at basically how the models get from the OEMs, from the manufacturers to the consumers. Which layers of distribution does it go through to the distribution, to the brands, to the mobile network operators, to the consumer, or direct online, how many, how quickly, etc. So that's another very relevant and understandable use for this type of research. And then another hot area is carbon capture. So we're doing a research on how big is that market, and then all the breakdowns, like how is it being used, because it's applicable across a wide range of different industries. What are the different technologies which are being used? What are the different model sizes? What are the different purity levels? So like huge levels of breakdown there in this important technology, and this technology that potentially has huge beneficial environmental impacts. So I guess what I was trying to highlight with that, just looking at our current sort of rota of research projects at the moment, is that this is we may be very focused on AI and on technology and on automated cars and things, but there's still a critical role for in-depth, detailed, in-person, well-researched research to drive strong business decisions and strategies. And that's it for me. Any other questions?
It's Oliver. Where does AI meaningfully improve the speed and consistency of primary research without changing its substance?
I think those things that we talked about, like I mean, the transcription is an absolute game changer, and the accuracy of it, and then the summarization of it, and the ability. The other thing that's really useful and changing processes is the ability to use things like Notebook LLM to pull together both transcribed interviews and other and secondary research and other key sources into a single kind of ingestion box and then query that and pull out findings. Makes it a lot quicker to present your findings as well through various slide tools. So there's a lot of efficiencies there without changing the fundamentals. The thing that is having less impact, I guess, on at the moment, from what I've seen, is the ability to find the right people and get them to participate, which is still a fairly slow process. There's some elements of automation of that, but it's still that's still the biggest time consumer and the biggest cost with this kind of research. But the fundamentals of the research, asking the right questions, getting people to talk, making them comfortable, etc., honing in on the key research questions, none of that has changed with this technology. Anything else?
Thank you, Oliver, for the answer. I think these are the questions. I think we can wrap it up now.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you found that useful. And if you got any further questions or want to interact with us further, please get in touch with us at the Business Research Company or tbrc.info, and we'd be happy to help.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Please look forward to our next webinar. Thank you. Good day.
Bye-bye.